All right, rewatchers, welcome back. We have hit that time portal and we are ready for our next retro rewatch.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, thanks for joining us again. Also, make sure to like, subscribe, share the podcast. We're in October, so we're going to do some scary movie, Halloween related type movies. And we're going to talk about the horror classic. Hey, speaking of that, what's classified as a classic these days? Because this is right at 20 years old. So is this a what's a classic to you?
Yeah, at this point, I mean it's got like 10 movies or something like that. With
Yeah.
cars, it's not classic until like 21 years. So I think if we're using a
Oh,
car metric, we're just slightly shy. But I mean, you got two generations since it's been out. That's probably classic at this point.
would you say this is a horror cult classic or just a classic? Because it did really
I
well.
I,
It
I
spawned
was going to say
several
I don't think I'd
sequels.
call it usually a cult classic is something that kind of has like positive buzz, but it didn't necessarily do that great.
Mm,
This was like a blockbuster. I
it
mean, this
was,
was
yeah,
like game changing.
it
This like
was.
created a movie studio.
Hey, this isn't like Idle Hands from our good friend Brad Edenfeld. Idle Hands.
Well, I mean, it's not idle hands. So I
Well,
haven't
he
seen,
just
I
said
mean,
that's a
idle
cult
hands.
following that didn't do well
Yeah,
at the box
yes.
office.
Yeah, I'd say Idle Hands is a cult following. I hadn't seen that movie in like 20 something years. But
Uh-huh.
yeah, that was somebody that watched Evil Dead 2 and was like, hey, I've got a good idea. I'm going to have a hand run around.
There you go. So, did you want to talk about this 4K before we jump in?
Well, you
Or
hadn't even said the title yet, I don't think, have you?
yeah, I did. I said Saw 2004
Oh,
classic.
okay. I might have missed
But
it
we're
because
talking
I
about
did get
Saw,
a
guys. Also, spoiler, deep dive
yeah,
coming up. Oh,
we are not going to be avoiding spoilers even in the slightest.
there you go.
So here I've actually got two releases of Saw behind me. I've got one here that's the 4K, and I've actually got another one that's a DVD. And so this DVD is actually kind of neat. Hopefully that wasn't too bad. I just bumped the mic. But this is supposed to be like a blood pack. There we go. There's the camera. A blood pack. And over 20 years, the blood is dried up. There's still like a
Wow,
little saw blade in there that will move around. I don't know if you can see it,
that is
but
cool. Yeah.
anyway, they did this with a couple of movies. They had the Texas Chainsaw Massacre that had so it has like a little gatefold in there. You can actually feel the little blood pack. But they had the Texas Chainsaw Massacre had a meat pack
Hmm.
where they did something similar to this, where they had kind of like this I don't know, it had this feel to it and it looked like ground beef in a
Oh,
package. And just recently on 4K, American Psycho released with a blood bag. I think it might have been, actually, it might have been a steelbook, and it had a cover, like a slip cover that went over it that had the blood pack. Although American Psycho and Saw are both released by Lionsgate, so I'm not sure if Lionsgate is who put out that Texas Chainsaw I was talking about. So but talking about Saw, we've got the slip sleeve here, and the slip sleeve is actually kind of neat because if you look, it's actually really reflective, like where the puppet's face is, and inside of it, it's got some different writing that's very hard to read. It's like want to play a game and greetings and welcome, and it looks very like weathered, like an old VHS or something. So I mean, hats off to Lionsgate for the slip cover. That's really 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 cool. Where they came up really, really short is on the actual transfer.
oh,
Like, so the whole reason you buy a 4K is to have like the best transfer possible. And I don't think it's that at all. As a matter of I have not watched my Blu-ray in a while, but I remember my Blu-ray better than the 4K. So like the 4K had a lot of artifacting, like digital artifacting in all the blacks. The blacks didn't quite get fully black and solid. And it wasn't just like film grain, it was actual like um it was an actual like digital error in the process, which it was filmed on very low budget film stock because it was a low budget film. But other issues that it had too is there were multiple times where the sound got out of sync, where
mhm.
like what the message you were getting didn't match, what the lip flaps were and stuff like that. And also probably one of that's pretty frustrating. But then another thing that's frustrating too, and I talked about this in Conan, where it had one time in the movie where the color timing changed, like right before they looked over at the party. And in this movie, it changed a lot. It was like five or six times, like mid scene, like the color grading would just change. And if it was at an edit, or like a fade or a transition or something, I would get it. But there was multiple times it just happened, like while Carrie Elwes was talking or something, and all of a sudden the colors, like the brightness shifted or something. And that is, to me, I mean, that's something that's almost like watching streaming or something. That's why I don't watch streaming, is because of stuff like that. And so from all of those angles, I would say it was not good. And like I said, I don't remember the Blu-ray having that many problems, but also the Blu-ray is going to be like 1/4 the data size of the 4K. So with it being so much smaller as far as like the density of data and all that stuff, maybe it wasn't as apparent, the flaws. But I will say this though, the movie had an Atmos soundtrack for that, and that was something I talked about in Conan, where some
Mhm.
of these movies that are 20 years old, 40 years old, whatever, they'll put an Atmos track, and it's not really anything. I think it's marketing speak, where they just put it through a processor where it makes a couple speakers have sound where otherwise it wouldn't or something. But this was amazing. The sound on
Mhm.
this was absolutely fantastic.
There was, yeah.
For instance, I mean, like right from the rip, when the movie starts, you've got Adam when he's coming up out of the tub, and you hear all the water splashing around him, and then he starts calling out, not knowing what's going on. It's dark, and you hear Dr. Gordon, who you haven't met yet. You just hear him off in the distance, but you hear him very distinctly back and to your right. But not only do you hear him to the back and the right, there's like this ambiance like through the rest of the speakers and the Atmos and stuff, where you hear the echo being in that solitary room. You understand what I'm saying? So the
Mhm.
sound was absolutely fantastic. So it's kind of a mixed bag. I wish it had a better video presentation, but the sound presentation was excellent. Next level. So there's the review of the 4K release. You wanna take us into the actual movie?
Yes, sir. So looking at the box office, well, I always like to look at 2004. Also, James Wan joint, right? Who is probably
James,
one of the
yeah, who
best
is,
horror directors currently, and he's been
yeah,
carrying the horror community. Yeah,
absolute master in the genre.
yeah. So 1.2 actually from IMDb, filmed on 18 days, which is very interesting. And I believe they had Danny Glover for only 2 days for all his scenes. I'm not sure if he had like tight scheduling. Interesting. Gross 56 million. Great return, by the way, right?
Yeah.
18.2 opening, ironically on Halloween. So coming up on 20 years, 2004. Overall gross 103. So man,
So
great
that's
return.
amazing. So
Beyond
so
respect.
the movie's budget was 1% of its return.
Mm,
And so, you talk about they only had Danny Glover for 2 days. Shawnee Smith, who played Amanda, they had her for 3 hours.
wow.
So, I mean, think about that for a minute. She was running a fever of 102, was sick as a dog. And I mean, she was basically saying, I can't do this. Like, 'cause I mean, you think about the majority of her scenes had that contraption on her head, which we're going to
Yeah.
talk about later. And that thing was heavy. They didn't make it out of foam or anything. It was like literal, like iron, steel, metal or something on her head. So, I mean, having a 102-degree fever, having that thing on your head. And she had this tongue depressor that was how she kept it from like rocking and like falling off her head and hurting her. So she had a rough day. But anyway, so like 1% of its budget, and it had $100 million return. Like Lionsgate has been a company since like the 70s, but like a lot of what they did was stuff like the Jim Henson Studios, like Muppets,
Mm,
and they did oh my gosh, Trey, the woman from The Shining that we talked about, she just passed recently. Um Oh my
forgot her.
gosh, I don't know why I'm drawing a blank all of a sudden, but she did these bedtime stories on like Showtime, and oh my gosh, what is her name? Any other time I would remember it, but anyway,
Trying to
so
look that
that but
up.
she did these bedtime stories. Shelley Duvall, Shelley
Okay.
Duvall
Yeah.
is who I was talking about. We've talked about her multiple times, but she did
Yeah.
these bedtime stories, or these fairy tales, excuse me, on Showtime, and like Lionsgate was the one that produced those fairy tales. They were like kind of like plays. So like they were a company, but they were like really, really, really small. And a lot of what they were doing was like they weren't doing actual productions. They were doing like releases. They would kind of be the middleman, like between Jim Henson and Showtime or HBO, or that's the kind of stuff they did. And then so somehow they got their hands on this movie, and they had $1 million to make it, got $100 million return. The next thing you know, they're buying Artisan Entertainment, they're buying like Stars Entertainment, Anchor Bay, and they're making movies left and right. And they're a huge company now. I mean, they're not necessarily like Universal or Warner Brothers, but they're massive. And it's because of this movie. You know,
Yeah.
this is what gave them the capital to go out and start making like bigger and better films to just continue to grow. And of course, Saw, like you said, it came out on Halloween. How awesome is that? There, you know,
Yeah.
especially now, there's so many horror movies that come out in like February and
Mhm.
May and in like March and just weird times of the year. But it after this movie, it became like a tradition, like every Halloween for like 8 years or something, except for like one. I think there was one year that got skipped somehow, like for like 8 years for the first seven movies, they had a new Saw every Halloween. So I mean,
Mhm.
that's really cool. That's kind of a neat legacy.
Yeah.
But you know, you talk about like the $1 million, like so you had five cast members that were like known actors at the time. You had Carrie Elwes, Mr.
Mhm.
Princess Bride, who was like very well known, Robin Hood Men in Tights. You know, I don't know how in the world they got him. You had Danny Glover, who I'm just going to be honest, I don't think he's a very good actor. But
Right.
that being said, he's been in a ton of big time movies, Lethal Weapon 1 through 4, Predator 2.
Mhm.
I mean, he's been in a bunch, you know, a
Yeah.
bunch of action movies. Then you had Monica Potter, who was pretty big at the time. She had done like Triangle and some other stuff, and she was gorgeous. Oh my gosh, Monica Potter is gorgeous. You had Shawnee Smith, who I don't know that she's as big as some of these other actors, but she had been a scream queen. Like for instance, she had been in The Blob in like the 80s. And so like she was a name, especially in like that scream queen like horror genres. People knew who Shawnee Smith was. And then you had Dina Meyer, who had like just not long before that, I mean, 4 or 5, 6 years, had been in like Starship Troopers, been on Friends. She was a known actress as well, you know. So like that just kind of blows my mind that like, you know, Lee Winnell and the director were able to get these people. And then on top of that, Lee Winnell, who was the writer, who like they didn't want to sell this script. They wanted to like produce it themselves so that Lee Winnell wanted to act, and that was the only way they could do it. And so like somehow this all worked. They were going to make this thing for $5,000 in Australia. In
Wow.
Australia, the government pays for films. Like almost every film made in Australia is actually funded by the government. And they didn't want this to be funded by Australia for the government, like the film industry they have there. So they were going to fund this out of their pockets. They were going to like go max out their credit cards and stuff like Kevin Smith did to make this movie. And then there was a producer for the Australian government that said, no, don't do that. Like I've got content. If you want to make this on your own, I get it, but don't make this for $5,000. This is too good. And then contacted some producers in Hollywood, and then that kind of led to where we are now. But do you want to kind of give us a synopsis of the movie?
Yeah, and I'll give some trivia here. Just looking at it's really interesting. So you're talking about camera angles and everything other. So in post-production, director James Wan discovered that he did not have enough shots or takes to fill out most of the scenes. So he and editor Kevin Rutert created their own filler shots by doctoring some of them to make them look as if they were filmed through a surveillance camera. Also, it says James Wan did not take a salary, but
Oh
he
no, he took a percentage. I
percentage,
don't.
but that's a good return,
Yeah, I was
I'm
going to say
sure.
I don't know. I don't know what percentage he took, but even if it
Right.
was only 1%, he was a millionaire overnight.
Right. And then also one other thing, it looks like Kerry Elwes filed a lawsuit against the producers and production company because he only received a normal salary with back end revenues. He claimed to have been promised 1% of the profit, which would be considered since the film earned over 100 million globally. The case was finally settled out of court, but due to disagreements, Elwes chose not to be involved in any of the other sequels until Saw 3D in 2010.
Yeah, I was going to say, yeah, that until Saw 7. And really, truthfully, like that that movie's awful. I definitely don't want to spend much of this video talking about that
Right.
one.
Right on.
But you know, like his character of Dr. Gordon, though, like Dr. Gordon does pop up in um the other movies. Like there's I think it's the fourth
Lawrence.
one. I think it's the fourth one maybe where the police officer is running back through the tunnels, like back to the bathroom, and there's a figure on the ground that looks like Dr. Gordon, but
Right.
it's been a while since I've seen like those movies, so I could be a little off on that. Um, but you know, like Dina Mayer, like she went on to be in like dang near all these things up through was it the well, so I think it was the fourth one was the one she was killed, if I remember correctly. But she was like kind of almost like the primary cop that kind of went through them because cops around her would kind of get killed. Like yeah, Donnie Wahlberg in the second one,
Yeah.
that was kind of the main cop, which again, I don't want to get too much into the other ones because I think we've got plenty to talk about here. But man, Donnie Wahlberg in that second movie was just, I, I don't know if the second one's not actually my favorite, but we could kind of talk about that later. Some of this movie is just beyond excellent, especially for a first movie, especially for the
Mhm.
first one in a series. And if you
Yep.
were to look at this movie as a standalone movie, it's nearly flawless. But if you start to take this movie with the 9 movies that come after it, there's actually some problems with this movie where they kind of, when they go to the next stories, they kind of retcon stuff that doesn't quite make sense. It doesn't quite fit.
Yeah.
Um, so like for instance, let's just start with that. Let's bring up the games in this movie real quick.
Yeah.
So you've got the razor wire that the obese man cuts himself in to try and get out. And then the door slams shut. You've got the safe that had the combination on the wall somewhere, and the guy's covered in flammable liquid, and then the
Yeah.
candle lights him up. You've got the reverse bear trap for Amanda.
Mhm.
Technically, not only do you have the reverse bear trap for Amanda, but you also got the guy on the floor that's got the key in his stomach.
Yeah.
Then you've got the bathroom with Dr. Gordon and Adam.
Mhm.
And then you've also got the guy in the drill chair that the
Yeah.
police come across. You
Yeah.
understand what I'm saying? Like, so those are all the games. Now think back through those games. All right.
Mhm.
How do you win? Like honestly, that's not just a rhetorical question.
Yeah.
That's kind of a problem with this movie when you look at the rest of them, because
Uh,
the rest of them, you got to bleed, you got to get hurt, but there really is honestly a way out. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like,
So
with go ahead.
so if you look to me, all right, you got Jigsaw, right? And I know he's evil and he did all his, but I think he was trying to get, I wouldn't say revenge, or he was trying to, all these people, of course, had been bad people. And it's one of those, I don't know. You ever go back to wrestling? There's a baby face and a heel. I don't know why wrestling's on came out. He could end up being the baby face in this because as crazy it is, he wanted to get retribution. He wanted to get even. He wanted these people to kind of pay for the sins. Almost you could even
So
go Christianity or one of those on this. Anyway, maybe I'm looking at it the
Well,
wrong way.
so I think you're right. With
Yeah,
with this one especially, I honestly think that Jigsaw is more of just a man angry at the world trying
yeah,
to get back at people that take their life for granted.
that's right.
Now, in the other ones, you've got more of this it's more of like a fable almost, or like a moral story of where, like, yes, there's these people that are bad people that are taking things for granted, but if you're willing to make the sacrifice, you can get out.
Right.
And he's got more of a lesson to be taught for those people than this one. This one, I really feel like he is just an angry man taking his aggressions out on people, and he's found a really jacked up way to do it.
Yeah,
Because like the guy with the razor wire, he doesn't have enough time and not enough room with his obesity to get through the razor wire out the door before it slams shut. You
yeah,
understand what I'm saying? He's going to get hung up. It's impossible. There's no win. The
yeah,
guy with the safe, with the flammable liquid, where's the clue? How do you figure out what set of 4 numbers? How do you have time? How do you understand what I'm saying? There's glass all over the floor. How do you continue to walk around when your foot is cut up like Die Hard? You
yeah,
understand what I'm saying? It's impossible. Then you've got like the reverse bear trap. This is interesting. What about the guy on the floor? Is it even possible for him to win?
yeah,
Like, why, like, does he have a tape? Was he given an opportunity? It doesn't look like it. And here's the thing. If you go back and you listen to, I don't remember where I heard this, if it was in the commentary, if I read it somewhere, but that was always something that really bothered me about this movie was the guy on the floor. Well, so Shawnee Smith is a heroin addict or a cocaine addict, whatever she is, right?
mhm,
And she's clearly, over the course of many movies at this point, she is meant to be a disciple of Jigsaw. Okay. Or at least that's what you get, the feeling like this was something that he was planning all along. Now, in a lot of ways, I think that was retconned, not something that James Wan or Lee Winnell really planned, but it does work when you take this into account. So that guy on the floor was supposed to be her drug dealer.
Hmm.
Okay. And that was in the original script, that was explained that way. And I wish they had figured some way to explain that, because that would have been so much better if that was a known quantity in the movie, if that was a qualitative thing that you were made aware of, because that works so much better for her to become a disciple of Jigsaw, for the fact of she is literally killing her addiction. Do you understand what I'm saying? Like,
He
that is
helped
her
me.
drug dealer.
He helped me.
Right. And so
Yeah.
that's the help. Like, okay, so for me to live, I have to kill the guy that feeds my addiction. Now, there's
Mm.
nothing to say she couldn't go out and find another dealer,
Yeah.
but you understand there's kind of an allegory to that. There's a metaphor
Yeah.
that can be applied. But that guy has no chance to win. And the only way that Amanda can win doesn't even have to do really with her hurting herself. She
Yeah.
has to avoid hurting herself by the fact she gets the mask off, but she has to kill someone else for her to live. That
Mm.
doesn't match any of the other games
Yeah.
except Dr. Gordon. Dr. Gordon's goal was to kill Adam.
Yeah.
But why? What did Adam do that was so bad for Dr. Gordon to kill Adam? That's a literal question. Like, compare him to all these other people. Is he a drug dealer? Is he a murderer? Like, he's a voyeur at worst. You
I just
understand
think
what I'm saying?
I think he knew about him, cheating on his wife, and he wanted to try to take him out, maybe.
Well, so I mean, Adam doesn't have anything to do with Dr. Gordon other than the fact that Danny
Take a
Glover's
picture.
character paid him to
Yeah.
take the pictures.
Yeah.
So I don't think that he cared anything like he was going to blackmail him for, I mean, he might have after the fact, but I mean, he was there just simply to gather information for Danny Glover's character, you know. But continuing with what we're talking about with the games, like, even with Adam, okay, like there's the key. The very first thing you see in the movie is that LED lit key that
Mm.
goes down the drain. And the
Yeah.
very end of the movie, Jigsaw says the key's in the tub. And
Yeah.
no, it's gone down the drain, which how could it not go down the drain? It was wrapped to the plug. And whenever Adam like woke up and shook his feet and like hit the plug to come out, the key went down the drain like anything would. You understand what I'm saying? It wasn't, I mean, if the plug wasn't wrapped around his foot, or and at least to me it was wrapped around a toe or a foot or something, there was no chance that he was going to get out of the tub without pulling the plug. Do you see what I'm saying? So
Right.
again, and what did that key do? Did it unlock the locks on their feet? I think that's what he said, if I remember correctly, talking about Jigsaw. But that's Adams. Did it also do Dr. Gordon's? Or was it just Adams? Did Dr. Gordon have a chance other than sawing his foot off? You
Right.
know, the
Really
drill
cool.
chair, the drill chair that's like going at the guy's temples. What was the way out for that? And he said, you said you're going to be a test subject. How many people did Jigsaw kill as a test subject before he actually played the game for the world to see, for the police to find, for them to run news articles on? You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So that's all stuff that's it's specific to this movie. And for a standalone movie, if that's what it was going to be, it works just fine. He's a psychopathic serial killer, and that's as far as it went. And this is his message to the world. This is his tapestry, right? But whenever you retcon it to the next 9 movies, that part of it doesn't really hold up. You understand
Yeah.
what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Because it's pretty different as you go on. Which, by the way, the next 3 movies were all written and directed by Darren Lynn Bousman. And Saw 2 was not Saw 2. It was a movie that Darren Lynn Bousman had written that he was trying so hard to get made in Hollywood. And then Saw came out and he was like, oh my gosh, these are so similar. And Lee Winnell and James Wan weren't unapproachable. They were brand new like directors and actors in Hollywood and stuff. So somehow he was able to contact them and they got together and they decided and discussed like, this is how we're going to make this a franchise. And we're going to take this story that I've written that wasn't Saul, and we're going to like make these things and change it to where it is Saul. And then now we've got the franchise. And that was something that the 3 of them worked on together: James Wan, Lee Winnell, and Darren Lynn Bousman. And up through those first 4 movies, it's pretty good. It's the 5th movie where it really kind of starts to, get kind of really far out there, not quite as good.
Yeah. Yeah. I'll tell you some of the notes that I had from it. So first off, the bathroom, as you would call it, was just gross. Everything's
It's a
rusted. It's
phenomenal
old.
set.
It is. I like the whole cat and mouse game. Back to the score. The score really
Charlie
set the
Clouser.
tone. What's that?
Charlie Clouser
Yeah.
is the composer. He's actually so like he was a former member of Nine Inch Nails with Trent Reznor and
Okay,
Danny
I can see
Lohner.
that.
Yep. And I mean, so that score though, oh my gosh, the score is just next level excellent. Like it is
Mhm.
very genre defining. It's one of those things, kind of like if you were to hear The Exorcist or something like, if you were like, hey, here's your trivia for horror movie, like pick what movie's the score from? It stands out. It's very unique and it's so good.
It is. I feel like that was on its own type character almost, of the
Yeah.
score.
Well, a score really does make and break a movie. Like
It
it
does.
really can.
Yeah. And then yeah, speaking of that, you're talking about music video with that. I felt like the way it was filmed with the girl what you said with the entrapment, the bear trap or whatever, that whole like rotating or whatever, that felt like that kind of 90s, 2000s kind of heavy metal, music video. Didn't you kind of get that feel?
Oh yeah. So I mean, so like before they actually made the movie, that was kind of that $5,000 I talked about. What they did is they shot like a 5 or 6 minute short that was the bear trap with Lee Winnell in the place of what Shawnee Smith was doing. And they filmed it almost exactly the way it was in the movie. And then the other games talking about the razor wire and the safe with the fire, they were filmed the same way with that real like jump, like it's almost like the person's like jumping around and it's kind of fuzzy and it kind of morphs and drags and pulls. It's really interesting how the light works in those things, the way it's like time stop photography, I guess, but it's really
Right.
sped up time stop photography, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Also on Jigsaw, and I think you've seen a whole lot more than these. I can't remember how many of these I've seen. Not definitely not all of them. Kind of stopped after a while, but it had been forever since I saw it. The
I,
Jigsaw
I've seen them
character.
all.
Okay,
So
you're very knowledgeable on that. So the Jigsaw character was that. What do you think that symbolism was for? Of course, the puppet Jigsaw for Tobin. Is it Toby Bell's character?
yeah, Tobin Bell is
Yeah.
the guy that plays Jigsaw. So I don't know personally that I see a whole lot of symbolism there, other than the fact of again, like this movie was so overachieving for its budget because you've got Jigsaw, then you've got Zep, which I'd like to talk about here in a minute, who's kind of the redirect of like, here's your killer Zep, and it's not really him, it's actually Jigsaw, who we don't know who Jigsaw is yet, other than a newspaper clipping. And then you've got the puppet that kind of is part of the game where he can go in and be a stand-in for him because he's got cancer and he's kind of weak, so he can't go in there and kind of like defend himself per se, although he does a pretty good job against Danny's character, which
Hmm.
honestly I can't remember his name right this second, but the police officer essentially. And
Yeah.
but you've got all these different levels that they pulled off, and the special effects for that were really good. The puppet was really creepy, and of course the puppet's iconic at this point, you know what I mean?
Dr.
Like,
David Tapp.
yeah,
No, I'm sorry.
Tap.
No,
No,
Detective David Tapp.
Detective Tap. Yeah, it
Yeah,
was it
yeah,
was Tap. You're right.
yeah. So that was always interesting. And yeah, the great cast, by the way, you mentioned earlier, and then the voice of Jigsaw was
That
pretty
guy's got a
spooky.
great
He
voice,
does.
phenomenal voice.
He does. I guess some of the negatives, because we're definitely all-time great movie, great horror movie, was kind of what you said. Picture is a little grainy at times. I mean, you could see the budget.
Well, so for the stuff in the bathroom, I really think that works. You
Yeah.
know what
Oh
I'm
yeah.
saying? For it being shot on the 16 millimeter or whatever it was shot on, I think that
Yeah.
works fine because it works real good with the grime. Where it doesn't work so good is in the other sets, like the bedroom, the police station, the parking garage. Although the parking garage is something else I'd like to talk about entirely. We can get to it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I feel you. I mean, there's definitely, which I remember when I bought the 4K, I bought it for like $8, so it wasn't like I had a whole lot of money in it. But I remember buying it. It was like, I wonder, this does not feel like the movie that needs to be in 4K. But it's a Black Friday special. I'll give it a shot.
And then to me, Adam was a little whiny at times on the acting. Couldn't you kind of see? I'd never seen him before. He was a little kind of annoying at
So
times.
he is definitely the weakest actor in the movie,
He is.
like
Okay, at
by a
least you agree with
lightning
that.
mile.
Yeah,
Yeah, no. He's his acting is very stiff. It's
yeah.
very like rigid. I don't know. I think there's a reason he didn't really act anymore after that, and he kind of stuck with writing. Because I mean, I'm not gonna say he hasn't been in anything else, but I don't really remember not anything of note. He's gone on to write and direct. Like for instance, he's the director of that Invisible Man movie that came out a couple of years ago. But no, his acting was not good. I mean, that's kind of like that low budget acting kind of thing.
Yeah, it looks like he has been in some movies, but nothing of real. Like I was looking at him as an actor. Um, Looks like he was in Insidious, The Red Door
Well, that
as
was
an
also his
actor.
property,
He
him
was
and James
cargo
Wan. So
pilot in Aquaman. He was looks like he was in a lot of the Insidious.
also James
Baba
Wan.
Man. Yeah.
James Wan directed Aquaman. So yep,
Okay.
he's
Yeah.
it's kind of
He was
like
in
it's kind of like the Matt Damon Ben Affleck thing.
And then to me, like Carrie Elwes was good at first, but then at the end, when he wanted to try to cut, he was talking about the family, you bastard, he would like yell and he kind of like whine, and then you could see his character like change at the end, and he would do anything to get back to his family, even though he's cheating on his wife. But he got a little like to me, I
So
want to call him whiny, just kind of annoying. Is that bad? Did you kind of see the
no, so
change?
here's the thing. So I'm fine with him changing characters at the end as far as like, okay, I've been the guy that's been holding steady and I've been the doctor that thinks about the facts and thinking through
Yeah,
the problem to okay, my family's like fixing to die and I'm not there and all of a sudden all control is lost. That's fine. That makes sense to me. I think he handled that fine. But there are a few times where his British accent
it is.
does
Yeah,
come out. Like you
it
hear
does.
like the inflection of the words he's saying is kind of British and
Hmm.
like so his accent or whatever it was that he was trying to maintain as
Yeah,
an American doctor, it did fall apart like whenever he was falling apart. You understand what I'm saying? So that was
right.
definitely there, and that was a thing.
Yeah. My other question is Jigsaw or whatever. How long do you think, I know it was a movie, how long do you think he was on that floor? And how could he sit there and stay on that floor for that long? Like
He was
hours?
on the floor for 6 hours, wasn't he? It wasn't
Yeah,
6 hours. And I
there
mean,
you go.
well, if he took a sedative like gabapentin or something, took 6, 7, 800 milligrams or something, I think that would probably calm him down enough that he could probably stay there and probably not feel the pain either. Because
Yeah.
something like gabapentin, it takes away nerve pain.
Mm,
And the only reason I know about gabapentin for anything wondering about it is I've got a friend who has seizures, and that
mm,
is what they give her. And that's something that we've talked about before. She is a huge fan of Saw.
mm.
So didn't know you were going to bring that up. Had no idea. But
Gotcha.
having talked with her and something that she loves so much, she actually she was a psychology major, and one of her theses that she wrote was on Saw and the moral ambiguity of did Jigsaw actually kill anyone? How responsible was he for them dying? So anyway, but yeah, I think, if they were to take something like gabapentin, it took away the nerve pain of him having to lay on the floor in the same position for so long. And it kind of like, took his motor functions down to where he was awake and alive, but no real desire to move, no real desire to do anything like that drug would do. Then yeah, I think that would work.
Yeah.
But
And then one other question they want to ask, favorite or best kill, brutal kill, or which game, kill or game, or which one was your favorite if you had to pick? Even though they're all pretty gruesome, but
for this movie in
yeah.
particular,
Yeah.
it's the bathroom. I mean, the primary game that we get to see, because like that's another thing. Every other game in this movie is like really simple and it's one person. This game is really complex and there's two people. So that's
Mm,
another thing that's pretty different about this game with the bathroom versus the other four that, well, I guess technically the game with Amanda had two people as well, but the one on the floor wasn't playing. He was a victim. You
mm.
understand what I'm saying? He was supposed to be Amanda's first kill to become his disciple. Trey, what was your favorite kill?
Yeah, so all of them are pretty gruesome and intent, but I guess the one that bothered me, it would be the one with the like the barbed wire or whatever. He's just all like running all around and cutting all up, and you could hear him like screaming and everything, and kind of way the way they kind of found him. And I wonder, I've always wonder if any of this was homage or whatever to Seven, because didn't you get the kind of the same type feel from
Well,
Seven? Maybe this is kind of influenced
so
by it. Just saying.
in yeah, so in seven, it's funny talking about that with the guy with the razor wire. There's actually even for glutton. No, is it gluttony? I think it was gluttony. The guy had to cut off a pound of flesh.
Yeah.
So really, if you were to think about that, I don't know that there were any of the other sins that were survivable, but
Mhm.
that guy, depending on where he cut off his pound of flesh, he
Yeah.
might could have survived. I don't think he did. I think he bled out from what I remember because it's been a long time since I've seen seven. But yeah, you're probably right. There probably is, which David Fincher directed seven. He's an absolutely phenomenal director as well.
Yeah, he
So
is.
that's probably a really good influence, probably
Mhm.
very real.
Yeah.
I don't know that I've ever put those two together, but that does make some sense.
Yeah. That kind of popped in my mind. Just saying.
So, but you talk about gruesome, really truthfully, honestly, if you really look close at this movie, there isn't actually a lot of gore.
Yeah.
Which I remember when the movie like came out, I remember seeing like a red band trailer that really wasn't very gruesome, but I think it was almost kind of like the Blair Witch,
Mhm.
the Artisan Entertainment did, where they did this really good marketing campaign to try and like hype it up to be this real thing, and just um kind of create this hysteria over it. And they
Yeah.
did the same thing with Saw of like, this is going to be like nothing you've ever seen, and in a lot of ways it really was. But and then whenever it came out on home video, it had an unrated cut that added 47 seconds to the movie or something like that. It wasn't much. And I mean, we don't really, I think we see one extra clip of like the saw blade going on like Gordon's shin,
Right.
but I mean, you don't see him saw through it. You don't have like a full prosthetic where you see him like snap
Yeah.
it off or him pulling the stump out of the chains or even the guy with the razor wire, like you see the after effect, like a picture of him kind of like hung up in the
Yeah.
wire, like I'm not saying it's not gruesome. The concept and the thought of it is mega gruesome, but really
Mhm.
truthfully, honestly, like it could have been way gorier. I mean, it could have
Mhm.
easily been something like Martyrs or something along those lines, and it wasn't. But with it being a low budget film, I wonder how many effects they could afford
Yeah.
like that. You understand what I'm saying? Like
Good point.
that were directly interactable, if you understand what I'm saying. Like,
Yeah.
yes, we get the concept of it, we think through it in our head, but we don't actually see it with our eyes because we couldn't come up with a gag that we could actually watch.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And I don't know that. I mean, the movie could have been exactly what they expected it to be, and that was always the plan. I don't know. I couldn't answer that, but I do know it's almost kind of like the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. People remember that being gorier than it actually is. Like, really, truthfully, honestly, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre is not that gory. Now, the second one is very gory. We talked about that, I think, on our very first video, but that's getting a little off topic. So,
Right.
like, let's change topic. Let's talk about you talk about the game and your favorite game. Let's talk about Zep for a minute.
Mhm.
Cause like, when I talk about the movie, not necessarily like fitting with some of the other films later in the series, Zep is another good example of that. Why is Zep even playing? Like for what we see of Zep, he seems like a nice guy. He seems like a good guy. Like, why does Jigsaw choose him? Like seriously, I want you to think about it for a minute. We'll take a pause for a second. Think about it. Come back to me on that. What do you think? Why is that? Why is he playing?
Everybody else kind of they were kind of bad people or had certain things that they've done or sins or whatever in their life, and he
Right.
seemed like a
So
good guy.
Amanda was an addict. The
Mm.
guy on the floor was her dealer. Dr. Gordon is cheating on his wife, which we're
Mm.
actually going to talk about that in a minute. Adam is, I guess we're considering him a voyeur scum of the earth. He's living off other people's misery. He's a bottom feeder.
Yeah.
Okay. You've got the glutton guy, you've got the guy with the fire, like, whatever their sins were, yada yada. Um, but Zep, the only thing we see of Zep is Dr. Gordon is teaching a class and he's speaking about a guy that's in the room as if he's a number, as if like he's just fictitious or something like, hey, we're talking about this chart. No, he's a human. He's laying right there. Right. And Zep brings that up. It's like he's a really cool guy. He's really interesting. Like he's so much more than this training that you're doing for these students right here. It's like you're not even acknowledging the guy in the room, right? Like there's nothing in the movie that would suggest why he's even playing. At the end of the thing, he's talking about, well, there's the rules, there's the this, that's the other. But so, like, I kind of wonder, like, Amanda became a disciple. I wonder if Zep was supposed to be the same thing. I
Hmm.
wonder if Zep was playing to become a disciple like Amanda did. Now, here's the thing. Was that even an idea or a point that Lee Winnell and James Wan thought of, or was that something that Darren Lynn Boyceman came up with for the second movie and they retconned it? I don't know. But like Zep does come across like maybe possibly he's on the spectrum. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
He clearly looks up to Jigsaw, like that he's a really interesting guy, as if he knows what the puzzles and stuff are that he's working on or doing, right? And so I wonder, by the end, he is killed, you know what I'm saying, by Adam, like bludgeoning him to death with the top of the toilet. But I wonder if that was his game, like talking about Zep to become a disciple, and then it was cut short because he didn't survive the game, like
Yeah.
Amanda survived the game. She didn't have her head exploded. But that's the only thing I can come up with why Zep's even playing, because in, in a vacuum, it doesn't make any sense whatsoever. It doesn't seem like he's a guy that's taking life for granted. Quite the opposite. He is actively, openly saying that life is not being respected, that it's not being shown the value and the depth that it has to Dr. Gordon when he's talking about John right there in the room. So it makes no sense at
Mhm.
all for Zep to be playing this game unless we potentially go with the retcon that he was actually potentially going to be a disciple. Does that make sense? Does that fit to you?
It does, yeah. I agree with that. That's a good point. I never thought of it that way.
Right. And so, I mean, I don't know that I've ever seen anybody discuss that either. Like,
Mm.
but I mean, to me, that's a big deal, and I'm
Yeah.
not going to say nobody has, but I know that I've never seen it. I've never read it. I've never heard it.
Right.
Um, but so like, and let's talk about Dr. Gordon. Like, so do you think he cheated on his wife?
I think so. I think
Okay.
he probably um I would say he got bored. He kind of had he's one of those maybe had everything, had the wife and perfect wife in the family, and maybe I'm just saying it's not right. Maybe got a little bored, and you can kind of see how kind of like, hey, you're never home. You're always, he would go in and kiss his daughter. Hey, um, I'll see you when you come back or whatever. It's kind of like he was the busy doctor, right? Always
Yeah.
working, and probably got a little. I'm probably not saying it's right. Probably got a little bored, and he went off and probably saw some ladies. Not saying it's right,
Yeah.
but that's the way I saw it.
So, so do you think he's lying to Adam whenever he's saying that he didn't cheat on his wife?
I mean, in that like misery and that like time in his life and what he's going through, probably yeah, he's probably lying. He's probably lying.
So I think I
My
agree with
opinion.
you, although maybe for slightly different reasons. Like, so with what we see in the movie, like for what Adam knows, I think that Dr. Gordon's telling the truth. The woman, the student or whatever that's interested in him, I don't think he cheated with her at all.
Okay.
Like, I don't even think it happened before then, because she makes a statement that I don't know how these things work, because she starts to unbutton her shirt and he says, no, this, that, and the other. And I mean, he's clearly getting cold feet. I'm talking about Dr. Gordon for whatever reason. And so, like, I agree with you. I think he has. I think that he had had multiple affairs, and I
Yeah.
think that he was constantly out. And I think, like you say, Monica Potter, his wife making the statement about like, "You're not happy. I know you're not happy. Just tell me to my face you're not happy, and I would be better with that. Just tell the truth." And but I think that in this microcosm for what we see with the student, with Adam, with him, I think in this one time he didn't, which I mean, he clearly walked out before they could do it. But I think that was the first time that those two had met to have an affair. But I think that he had been having them prior to that. I mean, she was like the newest, she was a new intern student that was coming under his attractions, and he was taking advantage of that. You understand what I'm saying? At least that's what I think.
And then he was pushed to the point, and he almost like he maybe went a little insane or kind of crazy at the end. He cut his leg off with the saw, of course. Do you think he probably ended up hopefully making it back to the family, or he's gonna crawl his way back? Or I always thought about like, all right, you made it through that door, but how you gonna make it? You know?
Yeah, so no, I don't think so. Especially in reality, I mean, he'd be in shock, which I mean, you saw he was already starting to marble where like his skin was white like a ghost because he was bleeding out and he didn't have proper tourniquets. He didn't have anything to keep there was rust all over that would be causing immediate infections
Yeah. Oh yeah.
and blood problems. Like, no, there's no way he would have made it in real life. I mean, but like I said, like in a later movie, you come across a figure in the hall that looks like Dr. Gordon, like he was crawling through the sewers or whatever that was and didn't make it, which I mean, there's
Yeah.
no way he would. And of course, the real tragedy of that was he didn't even need to do it. He got shocked and lost the phone because Jigsaw was on the floor and could zap him because it wasn't Zap. It clearly wasn't Zep that zapped him. It was Jigsaw on the floor,
Yeah.
and but had the phone been 2 inches closer, he would have known that his wife and his kid was okay. And I mean, at that point in time, it just would have been a matter of waiting.
Yeah.
You know, so that's just another thing to add on to that horror tragedy aspect. And I mean, I really think his acting in that moment when he just loses it was really good.
Yeah.
And that whole sequence is really like the sound of the bone saw and everything. Like it's hard to watch and listen to, and it definitely like you're getting goosebumps and tingly. You know what I mean? Like the
Oh yeah.
the the Charlie Clouther score is kicking in, and anyway, like that's and it's the ultimate. It's the climax of the movie
Yeah.
until the real climax of the movie, like game over.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Whenever you find out that Zepp has a tape as well in his pocket and he's got to follow the rules, and it's like, oh shit, he's not really the killer. Which I remember the first time I watched that, I think I might have actually watched it on VHS tape, believe it or not,
Wow.
in 2004, because I was in Waynesboro and I know I went to rent it, and I think the DVD might have been out. And so I think I got the VHS from like Video Warehouse or something like that. And maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it was a DVD, but I'm pretty sure it was actually a VHS. And I remember watching it and was so blown away. And I was like, I called Ryan and I called Brad and I was like, I don't know what you're doing, but get your asses up and get over to my house. Like, y'all have got to see this movie because it was just so game changing. You
Yeah.
know what I'm saying?
Did Ryan
Now it
like
was
it? What Ryan think about Saw
Oh
movies?
yeah,
He
he
liked them?
loved it. I mean, yeah, he loved it a lot.
Yeah.
Now, of course, like like the Sixth Sense would have come out before this.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? But it would have been like 8 or 9 years, and there was a while there that it just seemed like every dadgum movie had a twist in it, even though it didn't need one. And a lot of times the twist didn't even make any sense.
Yeah.
And and then this one came out. Like I said, I think it was maybe 8 years later. I don't, maybe not quite that much. When did Sixth Sense come out? 98,
I think it's like 6 years
97?
later. This is 2004,
Yeah,
I think.
right. So also I was saying, I was like, seeing 96 to 98 was somewhere in that range for the Sixth Sense, like right at the end of high school for us. And so yeah, like 6 years later, this would have come out, and this was whenever like a twist was just as good as a Sixth Sense kind of thing. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
But I did have one final thing that just
Sure.
kind of thinking about that I would like to bring up, and it's not even necessarily that important per se, but
Sixth Sense is actually 1999, so 5 years later.
5 years. Okay,
Yeah.
very good.
Yeah.
So, but I mean, there was even other M. Night Shyamalan movies that came out that I don't think had good twists between The Sixth Sense and this movie. Identity was another one that had John Cusack and Jake Busey, Rebecca De Mornay. That movie's actually pretty good, but like the twist at the end is kind of nonsensical. High Tension was another one as a French film.
Yeah,
High
that's a good
Tension
one.
is absolutely phenomenal,
Yeah.
but the twist is stupid. That was one of those things where a producer was like, what we got to have? We got to have a twist. And it was just
Mhm.
like, do we really though? I
Yeah.
mean, I guess we do. They're
Yeah.
making us do it.
Mm.
But I actually just recently got high tension on 4K. I haven't watched it on my 4K, but that might be something to talk about one day because high tension is a very good movie up till the twist.
I think I saw it with you
Um,
back in the day. I forget. I've seen it once.
yeah. Um, so, but anyway, but talking about the budget of the movie and talking about some of the things that don't work, and talking about Dr. Gordon and him, whether he was or wasn't cheating, like some of the stuff that didn't work in the movie to me were the sets. Like they spent everything on the bathroom, and the bathroom was excellent. But
Hmm.
like the bedroom that Monica Potter was in, like if you really look around, there's like curtains that are walls and
Yeah.
stuff like that. And then like there's the parking garage that looks like a barn. you
Yeah.
know, that is supposed to be for the hospital, but we've come to find out it's actually not the hospital, it's the seedy hotel. But again, it looks like there might have been a pigsty there and they just raked up all the hay before they took the shot. You know what I'm saying? So like there's some stuff like that that like again, you really see the budget and some of that stuff, and it doesn't necessarily kill it, but when you're watching it, it does kind of take you out of the moment a little bit when you see how limited some of those resources were for some of those rooms and stuff. But I mean, I guess they put the money where it mattered, you know what I'm saying, in the game. And I mean, I really there's a lot of movies down the way that influence, even stuff now like that escape room franchise and stuff, you know, I think definitely pays homage to this. Although I haven't really seen them, I don't think they're very good from what I've read. But anyway, I'm telling you, that's Saw. I don't know that I've got a whole lot more to talk about that I can think of. Do you?
Yeah, it was a great. I watched it on Peacock, the cock streaming, and I hadn't seen it in years, and it was definitely a good classic car rewatch.
You
I
know,
did want to
at some
bring,
point,
yeah, go.
I'm sorry, go ahead. I think we had a buffer issue.
Yeah, I wanted to bring this up. This is actually came out ironically today. I was looking at IMDb. So Saw gets killer 20th anniversary poster for a theatrical re-release. Can you believe it's been 20 years? It looks like you can see kind of like a theatrical re-release on Phantom Events
Uh,
20th anniversary. So that's kind of cool.
all right. So number one, they screwed up. Because I mean that's cool. They've got the pipes and everything, but why is there a hand there? It should be a foot.
Yeah, here it goes. That's
Oh,
it.
that's pretty cool. They did the saw blade for the zero. Yeah, why didn't they do the foot? What a missed opportunity.
Yes, yeah. Good point. But
Like,
yeah, I guess you guys can go check it out. And it's leading up to Halloween kicking off October. So that's kind of cool.
well, I mean, so I don't know that I've got a whole lot more to say about this particular saw, but I will say this. I think, maybe for a topic down the way, talking about like, so there's 10 Saw movies now. I think maybe talking about the five best and the five worst, that
Hmm.
might be a thing to do,
Oh,
and,
yeah.
and do two separate ones, talk about, okay, well, these are the five that are really good and worth watching. And these are the reasons why. And then here are the five that are not so good. And here are the reasons why. That might be an interesting idea. Cause I think the Saw franchise has a lot more that we could talk about.
Oh, yeah.
Um,
A lot
but
more
man,
meat on the
Saw,
bone.
yeah, Saw is so good, and we're going to get Saw 11. Like that's definitely going to happen.
Yeah.
So I mean, they're not done,
Yeah.
Which I mean, you think about in Saw 3. Again, we already talked about spoilers ahead, but Jigsaw is killed in Saw 3, and here we got like 8 more movies after he's dead.
Yeah.
Like they found some good ways and some not so good ways to kind of keep him going.
Right.
But anyway, so I mean, Saw is one of those movies that definitely holds a special place. Like that first viewing is just something you always remember. This is a movie that I pull out probably once every year, once every other year and watch because I mean it is a very, despite the flaws that it's got,
Oh,
and
yeah.
really other than some of the stuff like the sets and Carrie Elwes losing his accent for a minute, stuff like that. Like the movie is really, really good. And
Right.
in a microcosm of just itself, it's for back when you saw it and it was the only one, like damn, it was near perfection, it felt like.
Right. Oh, yeah. Well, I guess we hit that time, right, Chris?
Yeah, I guess it's time to hit the rewind button and get to the video store.
Make sure if you didn't earlier, like, subscribe, share the podcast. And we got some other great movies. Also, not gonna tell you what it is, got a special treat coming up next time. So you have
Yeah,
to
I was gonna
check it
bring that
out.
up too. If you didn't say it, I was gonna be like, hey, we got a special one coming up very soon, so be on the lookout. It's gonna be
Yeah, we're
very
gonna have some
unique.
more great October Halloween related movies. Be interested to see what we pick next. We'll see. But like always, be kind, rewind.